What up, what up? All my scientists, my artists, my philosophers, my geneticists, my roboticists, my biologists, my archaeologists, my astronomers. Let's get busy. This has been Busy from the Burbs. Chip.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ben Busy from the Burbs, broadcasting to you from Osaka, Japan. I'm joined by one of my new semi-regular guests / co-hosts. You heard him in episode 21. What can I say? The inestimable? Is that a word? Can I say that? Xainish. How are you, Xainish?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Unfortunately, I will be needing to run here at 45 minutes past the hour. It seems like every time we do a podcast, that's always the case. Wasn't that the case the last time?
No, we got it in a full hour.
Did we get a full hour in?
Yeah, we did.
I like to try to do full hours, but unfortunately, my schedule is just too hectic today, and we didn't get to jump until a little bit late. But topic of discussion for today: the arts.
Right.
What can you tell us?
So, I think the biggest trend is that films are dying. Unless you're talking about like those big budget Hollywood productions.
I see.
I think that it's kind of been killed by serial drama for multiple reasons. I think that people are more willing to invest in characters that they're going to see over the course of hundreds of hours than someone that they're stuck with that they get just 90 minutes of.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at stuff like Breaking Bad and how much time you get to spend exploring Walter White's character, all of a sudden 90 minutes to explore a character in a film seems completely unsatisfying for most people, I would think.
Right. But I mean, to say that it's like replacing film, like on what level? Because the independent film will remain, I think, a presence in entertainment.
I think that's true to a certain extent.
Like documentaries. What do you do about documentaries?
Documentaries are a completely different animal. Like I wasn't including those. I was more, considering stuff that falls under general drama. Yeah. Okay. That being said, though, the overall quality of independent films seems to be on the decline too. Maybe it's just harder for them to find money now, but I noticed that it peaked around 2008 to 2010, maybe. And I think the other thing is that in terms of what people are willing to spend money on, video games are kind of crushing it at the moment.
Yes. Yeah, video games certainly are. I don't have any statistics to back that up, but I'm pretty sure.
I do, actually.
All right.
I believe in 2014.
All right.
The video game industry made double what Hollywood did.
Wow.
I was reading an article, I think back in July, that as of July, Grand Theft Auto 4 or 5, had already made $3 billion.
Wow.
Yeah. That's 3 times what Titanic made.
That's incredible.
It is. But, I have to question how much of those statistics are stuff that you and I wouldn't consider games, like Facebook games, or like stupid like mobile shit like Candy Crush and Bejeweled, and
Yeah. What what does that portend for the future? It seems like video games. I don't know. Will the serialized drama even exist in the future if you have video games looming as like the heir apparent to the mode of entertainment? And what do you do when you toss VR into that and AR into that?
I think it's all going to merge into one media.
One media to rule them all, and in the darkness bind them.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, even if you could just experience a film from a first-person perspective through the eyes of any one of the characters, I think that's, definitely something that's probably I mean, why wouldn't they? They could tell the same film like 7 different times. Lord of the Rings, you could watch like from each one of the characters' perspectives or something like that.
Yeah, they could do perspective view, or you could just like kind of like orchestrate it, and people could sell their own orchestrations, where it's like you just kind of release the product, and then people can kind of cut it how they want to cut it, and then there will be like communities based around whose cuts were the best, like who was the best director, as it were.
Right. I mean, ultimately, I mean, I've known this for maybe 20 years, but eventually it's just going to be direct neural stimulation where, they're going to be I don't know if that'll work though. That's the thing. I hear it being, thrown about now,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm kind of skeptical because of neuroplasticity that you could just beam someone else's brain recording into someone else's inputs and that they're going to come out the same. I don't know.
Well,
I'm a little skeptical of that.
I mean, there has been like a first light proof of concept of that, where two humans were able to communicate to each other using the internet, like through brainwaves alone. I
Right.
mean, there's existence proof of the concept working, at least, but I think it has a ways to go before we get to like full total virtual, like matrix like immersive reality, virtual reality. Although I don't know how much experience you've had with Oculus, but people report that it does trick your brain. Like,
Interesting.
you do get put into a state like putting. Jason Calacanis, who does the This Week in Startups podcast, was talking about his experience with Oculus, and how when he was just like putting, after like the fifth or sixth putt, he actually felt like he was actually doing what he was pretending to be doing.
Hmm. It's interesting.
So I mean, there's something could be said in terms of like direct neural stimulation, though. I don't know. I think we'll be using that obviously makes the most sense, right? Like bypass the sensory organs, go straight to the sensor, to like the actual like um grand central station, the nexus, go to the brain and like directly stimulate there. But I
Right.
think we'll be using like the eyes and the ears, these traditional sensory inputs, for some time to come, probably 30 years until
Right.
we're able to get it.
Though, the interesting thing about that is kind of looking into qualia
Hmm.
and what do things seem
What
like to
what is
other.
qualia for the listeners who don't know? Define qualia for them.
So, qualia is the subjective nature of experiencing phenomena. What does red seem like to me? What do hot and cold, etc.?
Hmm. These are like quanta of experiential
Right.
of of experience.
Right. And so it's just kind of interesting because you don't ever really know if you're experiencing what the other person did. And
Right.
with the neuroplasticity and how people's brains are all wired completely differently,
Hmm.
you could end up having a heinously bad trip.
Oh yeah.
Maybe if stuff just comes down the wrong pipes, it's like you're supposed to be seeing red, but you experience your feet being on fire or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that would be terrible. That wouldn't be good.
Right.
People like jumping out of like skyscraper windows because they're afraid that the building's on fire. When in
Right.
fact it was just supposed to be Bambi in 3D. Like, so that's an issue. I'm curious to know, like, what comes of like looking forward in the future. Like, we always look to porn because porn has been like the
Right.
litmus for what the future of entertainment technology will look like. It seems like you could even make a pretty strong case that all technological advance has been in the service of pornography,
Or
or the
war.
pornography industry,
Or arms. Yeah.
or arms in
Right.
general.
That's where we got meth from, right?
Yes, exactly. So, where's porn headed? Like total immersive virtual reality, and if you fuck a virtual simulacrum, is that cheating? That's the big
Y-
question, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's gonna come down to the woman.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, it
we've
is.
there's definite talks about pedophiles and stuff like that, and is it
Mm,
ethical to let them, sleep with virtual children? You
right.
know,
Yeah,
I don't
that's a suitcase to unpack right there.
see. I have. If people think that's bad, the questions that I have
Yeah.
are are insane compared to that. So, let's say that we record a torture experience that doesn't actually inflict physical harm, but
Right.
like mentally creates the perception of that.
Right.
Is it is it unethical to use that on you know
A terrorist or something to extract
yeah,
information. I think if it's producing the same level of trauma, it doesn't really matter if it's physically affecting them at all. Like you can be
that's
put
true.
into a hypnagogic state where you feel like your hand is on fire, like that scene from Dune where she's like, "Put your hand in the box, put your hand in the box," and he puts his hand in the box, and gets this hallucination that his hand is on fire, and it's like the most excruciating pain that he's ever experienced. He takes it out. Like that was still pretty fucking sadistic of that bitch to make
Right.
him put his hand in the box.
Well, here's the thing. I was thinking in terms of drug rehabilitation, there might be some interesting things to explore.
Mm.
Because if we can override,
Mm.
because that's the thing, right? The main barrier to entry, I think, for that sort of thing is that you're going to have double input on your optical nerve.
Mm.
So they would have to be able to shut down, I think, incoming sensory stuff. And to what degree could they use that technology, say,
Oh,
to block heroin withdrawal?
I
Or
see.
right,
The sensory input, visual sensory input would have to like if you kept your eyes open, you would
right,
be seeing the superimposition almost, or you'd be like daydreaming. You know that ability whereby you're able to like if someone's like pink elephant, think of a
right,
pink elephant, and you're not you don't see it, but you see it in a roundabout way. You kind of visualize it within your mind's eye. You're visualizing this thing. You don't see it visibly. Like I'm looking at my desk right now, my computer, but if I think of a pink elephant, I'm
right.
imagining it. Well, you just have to close your eyes. By closing your eyes, then you'd be shutting off that sensory input that's kind of standard through your eyeballs, and you'd be getting the one that's programmed.
Yeah, I may or may not have had experiences with closed-eyed visuals.
Okay. Is that a disclaimer? You're disclaiming?
uh,
So about
it's
your
plus.
LSD experiments, Xainish, can we get into your LSD usage? Is that
Uh,
doable? Jokes. So
yeah.
okay, so
Let me
you've
ask you this.
yeah.
Let me ask you this. So, what if we instituted a program in school that basically forced students to all experience opiate withdrawals for 20 minutes as an anti-drug starting campaign?
Oh, just get them all sick to their stomach, like.
Make them experience what it's like to withdraw from heroin. And
Mm, would that be ethical to do that? That's the thing. Would it
yeah,
be
that's
ethical?
that. I mean, these are all ethical questions. It can't be quantified, right?
There's no way to quantify that. To
Right.
qualify that.
But it would be really good for first responder type training.
Yes.
It's stuff
Unless
like
it like irrevocably damages your psyche, and then it's like, well, now you're just damaged goods.
yeah, but that's gonna happen to them in the field eventually anyway. I think if that you know what I
True.
mean. If it's gonna happen in the simulation, it's gonna happen in real life.
That was the whole reasoning behind the intensity of Marine Corps boot camp basic training was this. It's summed up quite succinctly. We want you to, what is it? What did they say? Uh, some what is it? Better to sweat here than to bleed over there.
That
Or
makes sense though if you think about it.
if you break here, then you won't break over there. Basically, you subject the human body to a training environment or training regimen that is more strenuous than the actual operational pace that you would be experiencing if you were in country in Afghanistan, in Fallujah, Iraq, wherever the case may be.
That makes sense to me though, because when people train fighting and they do heavy bag practice with weights on their hands, I think that's a pretty good analogy for what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because then then performing under the pressure becomes
it's moot. It's a non.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think that the applications for like this neural override VR stuff are probably almost endless.
Oh yeah, certainly. I think when Jeff Bezos or Zuckerberg or fucking whoever it is talks about VR as being potentially the first $1 trillion industry, I think everyone it would serve everyone to just give some pause and consider that. I mean, it's true. Like, we have no idea. VR has been around for years now. For years and years and years and years. I can remember there was a VR exposition in Boston that I went to when I was maybe 12 and maybe 13 years old, and they had those old-fashioned Lawnmower Man like VR headsets.
Right.
The big ones, that you would like walk around, and there was like a circle
treadmill and
Yeah, and you were like, I don't even think they had you were ambulatory at that point. It was just like you were limited within this like foam ring or this like padded ring.
Right.
And you couldn't go out of those bounds, and you had this little like trigger mechanism that you would be using to like shoot the other person, and it was all blocky like Spectre VR 3D untextured graphics. This was before texture mapping.
Right. I remember I played a game at the mall back in the late 90s. I think it was called Dactyl's Nightmare. Where it was exactly what you were describing. It was like a 4-player game where you just had to hunt and kill each other, and there were like random weapons hidden throughout the stage. But it was that total. It looks like Star Fox on the NES, right? Or it's just
exactly.
Yeah.
Star Fox on the SNES, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the look that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the type of VR that they were using. So this is like
right.
It's come a long way.
Well, I think that the main thing that we should talk about here is cell phones as a transition technology.
Yeah, how does mobile factor in? Mobile's huge right now.
Oh, I think the reason that mobile as it exists is huge is because of the lack of ubiquity in Wi-Fi access. Like, once we have a global Wi-Fi, then we won't need like these gigantic, powerful phones and batteries, and we'll be able to use implants that just run off your current home Wi-Fi technology instead of having to have this huge irradiating brick in your pocket. So I think as we move towards that direction, that's going to change. But I think the first thing that's going to come are contact lenses that project a translucent overlay. You're gonna have a HUD, like you're gonna have GPS in your eyes projecting 10 feet out in front of you, to translucent display the weather readout, maybe a heart rate monitor.
Yeah. How much cognitive space does all of this take up though? Like, at what point do do the widgets, do you get just drowned in information to the point where it's like no longer functional? This thing is just like kind of an annoyance.
Well, I think that when you have the translucent, think about when you first played first person shooters and now how you like just interact without even really noticing the HUD, like you just kind of almost unconsciously process the information that it's presenting to you.
Hmm.
I think it's kind of like that, but obviously it's something that you're gonna be able to turn on and off, and eventually you'll have probably microchips implanted in your fingertips so that you can like interact virtually with the translucent projection in front of you.
Mm. What
But
do you foresee a time where people just stop going outside, or do you think like more along the lines of what Hugo de Garis's Artilect War hypothesis is, that like actually the human race will fracture into two groups, the Terrans and the Cosmos. The Cosmos will be all deep into VR, and the Terrans will be like actively like anarcho primitively rejecting technology as a whole and going back to nature. And on top of that, do you feel like advances in technology make the times when you are in nature more impactful, like more significant? You feel like the silences are more profound?
they could be. But I think that there's something lost, that whole Thoreau lifestyle. But I think that the number of Luddites is very small. How many people do you know that just refuse to use cell phones?
Only the people that I never talk to, really, or that aren't on Facebook.
Right. And so, really, you're kind of becoming a social outcast of your own accord. And, the Amish have been stumped with inbreeding, I've heard, to keep their numbers up.
Mm.
And when you look at the
Yeah.
number of people who, like, even within the Amish community, choose to say, nope. It's even when, especially when you look at the third world and anthropologists come in with their tools, they're like, fuck this stone spear, man. I'm done.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like, I
Right.
mean,
But
then you say that the Amish are having difficulty keeping their numbers up. That comes as no surprise, I think,
right.
to anyone. Like, it's a dying. Like,
Yeah.
who honestly is joining the ranks of the Amish? Like, who does that? Are there
Only
people that do that?
Well, they don't even let outsiders in. So your chance of meeting a hot Amish girl who you want to marry and move into, I think there might be a few people
Mm.
who attempt to do that, but I don't think that they take very kindly to outsiders. That's what
Yeah,
I've heard.
yeah. I don't think that they do. They're a they're a hermit.
Hermetic.
I wanted to say hermetic, but they're not.
Yeah, yeah. Hermetic is a religion, I think. Hermes,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
right,
They're hermits. They're hermitic. That's what I was going for. Yeah.
right,
So yeah, no one's really joining those ranks. So I mean, they've tried. Yeah, like you said, they're facing a population, whatever.
meltdown,
Yeah,
collapse. Yeah,
and
however you want to put
yeah,
it.
and it'll just end up in being like the Ashkenazi Jews, where there was like rampant inbreeding for some time until they come back into the fold of society. I could foresee the uh the what do you call it? The re-assimilation of the Amish people back into greater society at some
Right.
point in the future, when the inbreeding just reaches a point where it's unsustainable, or the people just need to look elsewhere in order to survive. Like, survival will always trump any kind of weird fetish for, like, because like that's what it amounts to. It's some weird religious fetish that they
Right.
live the way that they do. But when survival becomes like a dire, it's like either you stop doing this stupid shit or you survive. They'll change very quickly.
Yeah, I think there's that to consider, and then also the fact that you just have to look at, the law of entropy. and the fact that the Amish make themselves into a closed system. And what the universe teaches us is that all closed systems ultimately degrade until,
Yeah.
that sort of universal heat death or
How
whatever you want
how
to call it.
closed of a system do you think it is, though? I think,
I
like,
don't think they let any outsiders marry in.
I don't. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that fucking little lady Amish girl isn't getting banged out by some dude in the friggin' town, or vice versa. That some Amish guy on his way to the feed store, you know,
Yeah,
isn't.
but even still, yeah, I mean, I kind of see what you're saying, but the fact that they need to import people faster than because they're dying faster than they're breeding, obviously, but they're also hemorrhaging young people.
Yes.
That's the they can't keep they
This
can't keep their
It's
membership
so
up.
interesting. Like, if you took a bunch of Amish people and, like, swap them with, like, a bunch of, you think Amish people would make good North Koreans?
Oh, yeah, to some extent, it's interesting. There's a narrative for the history of North America that people talk about how this country was founded on freedom, but
Mm-hmm.
the people who came here originally, most of them were actually looking to be less free. They had real problems with the Anglican Church, and the church kept going back and forth between Anglicism and Catholicism,
Mm.
and they weren't allowed to practice their puritanical form of Christianity because a lot of it just didn't jive with what the crown wanted. So the Puritans left, and they came to America to be less free.
That's why. That's
Right.
bizarre.
But that makes sense, doesn't it? With America's weird kind of I'm gonna jerk off and then be ashamed about it.
Yeah, right. No, totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes complete sense. I mean, the ghosts of our Puritan past haunt us to this day. Um,
absolutely.
and it's given rise to all kinds of neuroses, insofar as feeling shame for, like you said, like the basic natural act of relieving yourself, you know, through masturbation. It could be really anything. Taking pleasure in anything, you know.
Right.
If you don't wake up at 5 in the morning and you're not out there, you're not working. If you're not working, then there's a problem. Like, that is deeply rooted in our our Puritan history.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the whole rugged individualism, you have to earn everything. But like, remember what we were talking about last time with the codependency? That's one of the main arteries towards that type of thinking.
Hmm.
Is that you're only as good as whatever it is that you produce for society.
Right. Human beings really have no inherent value. In
Right.
fact, you are born of sin. You are born of iniquity, and you have to earn your way back to zero, basically. Zero
So,
being their heaven or whatever.
right. Let me throw a radical idea at you.
Hmm.
So you remember what we were just talking about with the Amish, right?
Yeah.
If our self-worth is based on our opportunity to succeed financially, then aren't we hemorrhaging that opportunity just as fast as the Amish are hemorrhaging people
How?
with outsourcing
With outsourcing.
and the shrinking of the middle class?
There are market forces at work that kind of
Right.
induce that.
Right. So, and especially with the growing population. I mean, I think we're the only country in you know, in the G8 currently with a growing population. I think everyone else is shrinking but us. I mean, a lot of that's probably us importing people from Latin America,
Yeah,
willingly
from
or
Mexico.
unwillingly,
Yeah.
because the number of white people is definitely on the decline, and I don't think it's just a percentage thing either.
I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, we all have known for quite some time that the future of the population of the United States is going to be a little more looks a little bit more like Brazil than it does, you
Right.
know, Europe. But even in Europe, you see, like, uh, an increase in the number of Arab and Muslim people there, like, I don't know, Russia stays white somehow, right?
Yeah. But here's the thing. I think that there's going to come a tipping point where all of the white people flee Europe and come to the United States and Canada.
All of the white people flee. I just don't see it happening because many of the Arabs, they're intermixed at this point. There are Iranians who look just as white as you or I.
Right. Well, I mean, but it depends on which way the culture shifts once they have the majority.
Hmm.
Like if they were to if they were to get enough of a majority where they could turn, say, the UK into an Islamic state, I think that you would see a white flight somewhere.
Like a new kind of Puritanism.
Right.
Or no, it would be reverse Puritanism because you'd be escaping Sharia law. I see
Right.
that. I see an exodus like that not really happening to. I hate to say it, but not really happening to the U.S. I see it that happening to Mars.
Well, yeah, maybe. That's
Yeah,
I don't know. From everything that I understand, though, it's going to be over a century to terraform Mars in any meaningful kind of way.
we're not gonna terraform it. I think we're just gonna live in habitats and try and hash it out until eventually maybe something
Right.
happens over over thousands of years.
Right. We have to consider the scale of. We're worried about if humanity's going to make it through the next decade. And when you think about the scale of how long the Earth's been here and how long the dinosaurs were here, and even how long humanity's been around, 250,000 years,
Hmm.
when all of a sudden we're in jeopardy, just like within a period of maybe 5 to 10 years, that's insane.
It's frightening to consider that 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 we don't have that we haven't backed up humanity as Elon Musk wants to do on Mars at this point, or even on the moon. Like we don't have any kind of backup. Like this is it. Where this is like our one shot. So if something gets fucked up, like sorry, we're dumb.
Right. Well, I think the thing is, though, is that I don't know how sustainable life is on Mars without support from Earth, or at least the moon, anyway. Because the
Right.
moon doesn't have water, right? So,
It might have like trace amounts. It's not nowhere near the amount that you'd need. Mars
right,
has a lot more water. That's for sure.
right. And so Mars is probably way more sustainable than the moon is without Earth support because you're gonna
Yeah.
have to keep trucking water up there. I think that no matter how much you recycle the water up there, you're gonna end up with loss.
Yes, because there's no. Mars has no magnetosphere. It has no ionosphere.
Right,
So all of this, Elon Musk is saying, "Oh, we just have to nuke the planet with a couple megatons of nukes, and then like
isn't this
you
more of a
know,
gravity issue?
well, there's no yeah, there's no magnetic field to keep
Right.
all of that shit in. You know,
Yeah.
there's
And
no
plus,
ionosphere.
right. I don't know that we can make one.
You have to go drill to the center of Mars and like get the iron ore down there to start rotating again. I think
Right.
that's what's happening, right? At the center of the Earth, there's like molten iron that's
Right.
in constant convection that's
Right.
producing the magnetosphere. I could be wrong.
Actually, it's interesting that you should mention that. Because there's a podcast that I like called The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a science section where they have 4 or 5 skeptics, and they create one real news story or 3 real news stories and one, or no, there's 3 fake news stories and one real one.
Mm.
Or something like that. And you have to figure out which one is the fake. I think it's 3 real and one fake. And it's interesting that the iron core of the Earth only, like the absolute inner core, only solidified about, I think, a billion years ago.
Mm.
But that's kind of
Wait, a billion years
yeah,
to
just a billion years.
magnetosphere.
Well, I don't know how long. I don't know how the magnetosphere that we have now has been in place, but the entire core apparently used to be liquid, and now like the dead center of it is solid, but it's surrounded by the liquid iron.
Hmm. Interesting. The evolution of planets.
Right.
Well, I want to do some forensics. So we started this conversation talking about the future of entertainment, and
Right.
somehow ended up talking about Amish people, North Koreans, and Martian refugees.
Right.
How did we get there? What's the
Oh,
main theme? What's the connecting theme?
I think it's human evolution.
It is,
Because
isn't it?
we're talking about how media evolves, and it comes out, well, how's humanity going to evolve around media? I think is the immediate next question.
Right.
And then we started talking about open and closed systems and how. But one thing that I will say about the VR thing
Mm.
is that if we make all the goods that we consume virtual, then we almost completely destroy scarcity.
I see. I see what you did there.
Yeah.
The thing is, we'll never be able to completely make them all virtual because you're still gonna need water. You're still gonna need food.
That's true, but I think that if you can put that to automation and have, what do they call that? The technological, not zenith.
The
Where we reach
technological
that point,
singularity.
or just singularity. That's it. There we go. Right. So if we could reach at least a technological singularity or a point of where technology can perform its own maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
and we have it set to, give us food and water, etc., then I mean, you have to think about it. Think about all the energy that we spend on consumer goods
Yeah.
versus how many people one supercomputer could probably VR simulate for, especially once we get into quantum computing.
Right. You have like a sufficiently advanced AI, like distributing everything, and be much more efficient. Like, yeah, we could definitely. I foresee a time where we are post scarcity, where
Right.
we have reached that plateau of abundance, the bright
Right.
plateau, as I like to refer to it as. It's just a matter of getting there, and then, um,
Well, I'm sure you've come across the Venus Project people, right?
yeah.
But
I
like,
came across the singularitarians and Kurzweil before I came across them. They were kind of like
right.
later stage.
Yeah, I don't know, the people that I've come across in that group leaned very heavy conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
Like they're very heavily tied to the zeitgeist movement, etc.
Yes.
Right, which, you know, leave it to people to ruin a good idea by mirroring it with a bad idea
Right.
or a bad
Shit
a bad
happens.
perception. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Like
just so.
like economic conservatism or even sanity in the United States is dead now because it's inextricable from evangelical Christianity at this point.
It's even more dead on another front if Hillary Clinton gets elected. I mean, uh, but I'm curious, how does evangelism, Christian
Right.
evangelicals, how does that inform a society which has abandoned all fiscal conservatism?
Because fiscal conservatism is linked to the right wing, and the right wing made it all about religion in the 70s. What happened is that when African Americans used to vote almost entirely Republican because that was the party of Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
But then Barry Goldwater opposed the Civil Rights Act of 1965 on
Mm-hmm.
libertarian grounds and not racial grounds.
Mm-hmm.
But the African American community didn't seem to see it that way
Yeah,
from what I've
damage was
read
done.
historically. Right. And so they switched parties. And so what happened then is that all the Southern people who, which has systemic racism from the Reconstruction era and
Mm-hmm.
Jim Crow laws and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to be in the same party as And so what they did is that, see, the South used to vote almost entirely Democrat because around the time of the Civil War, there was like that great schism where there was the radical Republicans in the North who were the abolitionists and stuff like that, and you had to go to one side or the other. So basically, the North and South swapped into separate political parties,
Right.
and then they got resplit back.
Democrats in the South, Republicans in the North.
Right, but now if you look at the solid Republican core, it's the Bible Belt in the South. And
there
that
was this
through,
like flipping. There was like this strange inversion, like almost like a pole shift.
right, and that was done by Jerry Falwell and the Moral Majority.
I was gonna say Jerry Lee Falwell at the top of the
Right.
conversation.
I mean, that's why our political system. Well, that's one of the main reasons our political system is screwed up. But the real main reason is that we have a winner takes all system. When I was taking a political science class on American government, we did an experiment, and we were broken into 20 different groups. The class, there was like 60 people in the class who were all broken into like 20 different groups of 3, and we found out that just through trial and error, that every single issue ended up with only 2 groups.
Really?
Well, yeah, because what happens is that the other side is going to bandy together with other people, and if you don't, then you just lose out on everything. That's what happens when you have a winner-takes-all political system. So there's no second and third place. Like, I think there is in the British Parliament, right?
Yeah, but there's always, like, the shadow government, which is all a bunch of lords, like, monarchy still, like, lingering there.
Yeah, actually I was listening to Dan Carlin talk about the difference of like the presidency being need to split into 2 different jobs. How you have like the prime minister and then like the president basically. Where one guy is like the charismatic face and the other guy is the bean counter. And that marrying those 2 things together means that the bean counting is always what's going to go on the chopping block.
Oh, I see, yeah, because it's so...
Right. Because charismatics are going to win every time. Because that's
human nature. I mean, it's just like, we're just dumb like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that... I don't know that it's dumb. I actually think it's a clever kind of workaround. Because if you consider that, you know, how did they put it exactly? I forget. It's easier to survive together than alone, and the bigger the group, the greater the chances of surviving. And so if the charismatic person is good at aggregating power and consolidating wills into one, then that's why the United Nations... The problem with the United Nations, though, is that it's completely lopsided. There is no nation-state equality in that whatsoever. It's still the United States and then everyone else.
Yeah, it's the Security Council.
Right. And the Security Council veto thing, obviously, Russia likes to play politics with them because that's one of the last few buttons they have left in the world.
Right. And
so
they press it a lot.
Right.
We've raised a number of interesting topics. We covered a lot of ground. We need to pick this up. This should be one of a 2-part series. I want to put a pin in it where it is now. Thank you very much, Xainish, for coming on the podcast again, and we look forward to having you on in increasing frequency in the future.
Thank you. Sounds good to me.
Anything else you want to impart to the listeners before we wrap this one?
Yeah. I just like to say that I think that the reality is that everything that we have, and if we think of politics as a technology, I think this is a good way to close full circle. If we think of politics as a technology, we're all a bunch of Luddites. when we like call on the founding fathers and the Constitution and stuff like that, and people who even claim to be progressive aren't really. They mean progressive within a very limited scope.
Right.
And I don't know. I think that we're going to end up with some radical changes in the next 20 to 30 years as we say goodbye to the baby boomers.
Yes. I think this sets up our next conversation. I want to discuss futuristic forms of government,
Right.
or I want to talk about anarchy. Is what I want to
Well,
talk about.
I think that if everybody lives in a virtual world, then anarchy is completely possible. If there's no way to actually harm someone else, and if
Right.
there is no scarcity, then there's just
Well, let's save it. Let's save it
all
for the
right.
next conversation. Again, thank you very much. If you were entertained or educated by this podcast, please click the PayPal link, donate to our cause. Do it right now. Thank you very much. We'll catch you next time. World peace.